Colorado. So I'm joined right now by Michael Sandoval. He's over at Western Wire, where he reports on energy issues. And Michael, you there?
I'm here, Joshua. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. So
great. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's my pleasure. So I understand that. Who funds Western Wire, by the way?
We are a project of Western Energy Alliance.
Very good. So you cover, I guess, the whole waterfront, oil and gas, and also some of the other energy related issues as well.
Sure.
All right. So you had mentioned that Boulder has a climate lawsuit going on. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
So yeah, there's a movement, a national movement by municipalities and a few counties in California and New York to sue large, deep-pocketed oil and gas companies. So BP, Shell, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, ExxonMobil, those are the big five that have been named, have been targeted by these coastal cities. So there's a handful of cities in California: Oakland, San Francisco, San Mateo County, and then on the East Coast, it's New York City. They've targeted the oil and gas companies for lawsuits pertaining to what they claim are climate change damages. So in the case of the coastal cities, it would be rising waters and mitigation for that, so seawalls and other things that they're trying to claim as damages. So Boulder has been discussing moving forward with their own similar lawsuit. Of course, Boulder is not a coastal city, so
not yet.
Not yet, no. But Boulder's not a coastal city, but in their own agenda items discussing this, and in their city council discussions over the last couple of months, they are and have been discussing their part as showing other climate change impacts that they claim are relevant to them, and of course the 2013 floods, September 2013 floods are named, as well as wildfire impacts, and right now they are still in the process, deliberation of whether or not to do their own lawsuit. They haven't filed one. I've been pestering the public information officer very politely but persistently for the last month and a half about sort of where we are, where they are, on doing this. And so they're still discussing it. We did an open records request to find out sort of where they are and who they might be suing and when they might be doing this. And we don't know yet. They haven't, at least in their open records documents, disclosed possibly who they might be suing. They suggest it would be the companies who have a substantial presence, quote unquote, here, who are greenhouse gas emitters. So that could be any of those big companies that have already been named in some of the other lawsuits, but it could be local companies as well. And it may or may not be limited to oil and gas companies. I think one of the California lawsuits does explicitly name a coal company, and we're not quite sure who is going to move forward with it. It's just going to be the city of Boulder itself, or a larger group of municipalities or counties. I know they mentioned in one of the stories we reported on it that they might be seeking support from the county of Boulder, but also some of their regional neighbors who have also been involved in some of these oil and gas, bans and moratoria battles. So that might be a bigger thing than just the city of Boulder.
Is there any discussion about how much they have budgeted for this?
No, the documents were actually pretty cagey about what they were seeking. Mayor Suzanne Jones has requested the city attorney prepare a confidential document and that was as of about a month and a half ago, to assess cost and risk of a lawsuit. They did discuss a little bit about what the city's budget allocation would be, and so far what they would acknowledge would be that the staff resources that would be involved would be could be harmful. I mean, it could be costly in that sense too. There are other municipal pursuits and other things that are involved that have nothing to do with the climate change lawsuit. But here's the key, Joshua. The lawsuit itself would be brought by outside plaintiffs' attorneys.
Right. So then that would allow them to solicit money from outside sources in order to fund the thing.
Yeah. So it'd be sort of the paid up front, and on the backside they would get the yeah, exactly, or other outside funding groups. So our thinking, and I mean Western Wire, is would be to look to the examples in places like California, the large plaintiffs' attorneys firms that have filed those lawsuits. Similar outfits would probably be doing the same shopping here for the potential lawsuit, with the idea that they get the 25 or 30% fee.
Sure, they work on they work on contingency.
If a determination is in their favor going forward.
So then most of the financial, aside from time and effort, most of the financial risk ends up being on their side.
Based on the plaintiff's attorneys. Yeah.
So how do you end up drawing how do you end up drawing the Jamestown 2013 floods with this? I understand obviously there was a lot of damage, but for those of us who were old enough to remember, even though we weren't here, old enough to remember the Big Thompson Canyon flood back in, 1976? It's a similar event, and that happened decades ago. It seems to me that if you're going to have a cause and effect, you need to have the effect happening, because of the cause. That if there's a similar effect that predates the alleged cause, doesn't that make it harder to prove a direct cause and effect between what they're claiming and the damage of those 2013 floods?
Well, in the example in California, the lawsuits there, they've actually had a judge determine a couple things. One, these California lawsuits were originally filed at the state court level because previous attempts to do it at the federal level have been unsuccessful.
Right. And that's often the case with this sort of thing. You saw that with the asbestos cases were all done in state court.
Mm-hmm. No, well, they rejected it at the federal level. The federal court, the case went all the way to the Supreme Court. It was an 8-0 decision. Justice Ginsburg and the court decided that the courts don't have the authority to regulate emissions. That's a Clean Air Act and an EPA decision. That's not for the courts to decide what the appropriate levels are. So here are a handful of cases that have been filed in state court on charges of public nuisance being the common claim to all of these lawsuits. So they're trying to go into state court, and the Oakland and San Francisco cases, the judge has decided that if there are things to be decided, that the appropriate level is actually the federal level. But in doing so, he also issued an invitation to do a tutorial, what he calls a tutorial, and that is to allow both of the, both sides, both councils to present on climate change. And so, in the background of all of these lawsuits isn't just, the money aspect, which is, the damages they're seeking, punitive damages and disgorgement of profits from the companies, but I think it's another chance for the cities and the folks that are, adamant about climate change to try to get a chance to litigate climate change,
sure. Sure, that's really the goal here.
Battle.
It's regulation through litigation. It's not. It really is not the money itself.
And so next week that's actually going to take place in California for the two cases, Oakland and San Francisco municipal cases. I would imagine that Boulder would be of a similar flavor, a chance for them to expound on why the 2013 floods and why the wildfires we've seen recently are due to climate change and not sort of naturally occurring cycles like El Nino and La Nina and drought and that sort of thing, and put those arguments forward to show the cause and effect. I think the hard part, and some of the folks that I've talked to, is that it's going to be extremely difficult to prove those things, because most the climate scientists say, there's on the climate change side, that there's evidence of in their minds that things are being exacerbated, so naturally occurring things. So the storms are stormier, they're more intense, or more longer duration, but you still can't do the cause to effect that this is exactly because of climate change.
Sure.
Because weather isn't climate, and so they do have a big hurdle to clear on that. But this is what appears to me to be kind of an effort to fling a bunch of stuff at the wall legally, so to speak, and see if any of it sticks. It's why there's not just one or two cities in California. It's like a half dozen.
Yeah.
And in many cases, I was looking at one of them, San Mateo County. You have not just public nuisance; it's public nuisance, it's private nuisance, it's negligence, it's 7 or 8 claims that are involved here, and see if any one of those works out. And I think we're going to see a long, protracted battle before any of this either is adjudicated, or we're not going to see the end of it before we see a bunch more of these lawsuits filed in the first place.
It's a real shame, because I think most people don't elect city governments or county governments to do this sort of thing. I think most people elect city and county governments to deal with direct local issues, not with trying to fix the world. And it's unfortunate, because it's really not what most people think of when they go to vote for city council.
But Boulder has as we all know, has a long history of believing that it has something to say on all sorts of issues, not just not just city issues. The nuclear movement in the 80s, and anything recycling, climate. Boulder wants to be part of that conversation, and so they have, as of today, essentially they've decided that they want to pursue this at some level. And at this point, we're just waiting for the press release to go out saying that they've filed, and hopefully once that happens, we will know obviously who the players are, who the plaintiffs' attorneys are that are filing it, and,
sure,
and who the defendants will be.
Sure, and then that gives you a little better roadmap for what the suit will look like. You had also mentioned that you wanted to talk a little bit about the AG's race here in Colorado.
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things that folks, especially my experience on covering horse race politics, Republican politics, is that the shiny object tends to draw all of the attention. And so, in the presidential years, obviously the president's race sucks up most of the attention, and folks are obviously running for state house and state senate in those years. Kind of jump around and scream out, me, pay attention to me. Make sure you're not forgetting local politics. I think the same thing happens in midterm races. So the governor's race, which is of course obviously the most important statewide race, tends to suck up lots of energy and attention, and that leaves some of the other statewide races to be important or not, based on sort of the personalities of who runs, and and so forth. So you're left with the Treasurer's race, Secretary of State, and of course, Attorney General this year. So I think drawing attention to the Attorney General race is important.
So what in particular? What in particular draws Western Wire's attention to it?
Well, the previous office holder. So we have Cynthia Kaufman, who is not running for re-election. She's a Republican, and of course the Democrat John Hickenlooper is the governor. They've had a lot of, shall we say, disagreement over energy-related issues over the past few years, going back to 2015 and the Clean Power Plan by the Obama administration. Governor Hickenlooper was not inclined to support joining the lawsuits that were going on at the time, filed by other states' attorneys general. And Cynthia Kaufman wanted to have Colorado placed in that. And so not only was there disagreement sort of between, office holders, but Governor Hickenlooper actually, petitioned the Colorado Supreme Court to give a determination on whether or not he could have more of a say in it than just, some sort of advisory role. And the Supreme Court said, no, there's not. The Attorney General is independently elected. And so she can act of her own, sort of initiative to pursue this.
And that reaffirmed a ruling back from when Ken Salazar was the Attorney General,
yes,
as I recall.
Yes. So you have a thread that starts there. You have the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission that's currently embattled in it's a lawsuit of its own. And, last year there was a Circuit Court of Appeals ruling that was not favorable in the COGCC's eyes. And so they wanted to appeal to the, state Supreme Court, and Attorney General Kaufman agreed. Hickenlooper did not, but she was able to move forward and support that decision to appeal to the state Supreme Court. So on energy issues, there has been disagreement between Attorney General and Governor, and I think that
we'll see
going forward, you might have some of that conflict.
Yeah, exactly. Depending on who gets elected governor and who gets AG, we might have a similar thing. Michael Sandoval of westernwire.com. You can check out his writing on oil and gas issues regarding here in Colorado based on that. Coming back on the other side of the news, we'll be joined by Joey.